Welcome back to the Green Yard. It is the middle of September here in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's actually unseasonably warm for us. Today it's going to actually be 110 degrees. Tomorrow it's going to be 112, really on that warm side. And fortunately for us, I'm over here in the pool part of the Green Yard, which is this area where we have our more heat-loving tropical trees. And we're going to talk specifically about one of them today. But in the pool part of the Green Yard, you can see all of our bananas in the background. We're actually working on taking those bananas out. I'm planted a few pups along here, which I'll show you here in a few minutes. But we have our Barbados cherry tree that has done very, very well. Obviously our fig tree here, I still maintain it is a brown turkey fig. We bought it as a mystery fig. Just behind me here is the tree that we're gonna talk about, so we'll get to that. I recently did a short on our Mexican red guava, so definitely check that out. And we have some of our citrus over here in the pool part as well, like our navel orange tree, our Mexican key lime, and then we also have a white sapote tree over here. But we're here today for a little update video, a little how's it growing video. I'm trying to put these how's it growing videos out once a year, so hopefully you as my viewers can see the progression of these trees, how they're doing, kind of what I've been able to achieve with those trees. Maybe that could help you determine where you want to be at with those trees. I know, for example, our Monstera, I did a how's it growing with our Monstera tree. After 1 year, how's it growing? And I had a lot of comments that were like, that's it? It didn't grow any bigger? Why? And some of the trees do that. This, for example, is our ice cream bean tree. That first year that we had it in the ground, I actually made a big mistake. And I talked about it when I did my growing video last year. How has it been growing after 1 year in the ground? This time it's how has it been growing after 2 years in the ground. Last year I made a big mistake. I didn't realize it was its first summer. I guess I forgot that it was its first summer in the ground, and we had that record-breaking heat last summer, just like this summer, and it just fried that tree literally down to the roots. Luckily, most of our ice cream beans are either seedlings or cuttings, so it just came right back, and that is literally what you're looking at right now. So realistically, this tree has only been growing, and this is about a year's worth of growth, even though the tree itself has been in the ground for 2 years. So let's go ahead, let's talk a little bit more about this tree, some things that I've been doing, and how is it growing. Here we go. So we have some absolutely gorgeous Barbados cherry flowers here, those acerola flowers. Barbados cherry has been in the ground for just over a year, about a year and a half now. And I meant to do an update video this spring, didn't quite get around to it, but it took a hard freeze this past winter, but it's come back beautifully, had some really great structure. I've been pruning a lot of my trees more and more, and so I actually have pruned this one significantly a couple times so far this year, and it seems to help with that structure. I actually did a short about my rose apple and pruning that and how well it did, so definitely check that out. Here's one of those banana plants that I was talking about. This is either a dwarf Cavendish or a dwarf Namwa banana. And I took those pups out of the pool part of the Green Yard, where the actual pool is on the inside of this kind of gate here, because we are going to be redoing our pool here shortly. And unfortunately those bananas, those big huge ice cream beans and everything else have to go. But I'm trying kind of this agroforestry principle here, where we have kind of our bananas as almost a support species, since we have all these leaves and the stalks and everything else, and we can lay those down underneath our fruiting trees as almost like a extra mulch. So they're creating some mulch there, and then of course they do create the beautiful bananas too. This is our fig tree, brown turkey fig. It's what it seems like when I look at it. And when I look at the fruit, has some figs on here. Brown turkey's been doing pretty good. This tree itself it usually gives me 2 harvests a year, although last year I only had 1. This year we're looking like maybe we'll have 2. It just kind of depends on how the rest of the year goes. The first harvest that we had in the summer really wasn't that spectacular, only a few fruits. And when I say a few, we probably only had like 60 as opposed to 100. So we'll see if we actually get to harvest some of that fruit this fall, later in the fall. Originally had bananas planted in between all of these trees, kind of as that support species. Unfortunately, a few of them did not make it through our record-breaking summer. But we do have another one here that did. I believe this one is actually a dwarf namwa, if I remember correctly, so doing really, really well, putting out a lot of new growth. I'm hoping that this ends up being a really good spot for this, not only for fruit, but also as that support species where I can literally just chop the stalk when it's done fruiting and then let it decompose here and feed our other fruit trees. I actually harvested our first dwarf namwa banana rack earlier this year in the spring. Definitely check out that harvest video. We have this Mexican red guava here. Guavas do amazing, especially this time of year. In the fall, I had a comment recently asking if we should plant guavas in the fall. 100%. In fact, most of my tropical trees that I've planted in the fall, even things like our soursop, our sapodilla, they ended up doing fantastic. This ice cream bean tree, right, ended up doing really, really well. Guavas are one of our easier tropical trees. They are very similar to like our citrus trees. They grow similar to our citrus trees and do very, very well if you plant them in the fall. And then over here on kind of this other side, we do have that navel orange tree with several oranges on it. This tree was a rescue tree. I took it from a different part of the yard where the previous owners had planted it. It had grown very little in the almost 10 years they had it, so I took it out of the ground and brought it over here, and now it has given us fruit last year, and it is again this year. We have our white sapote in the middle there, putting out a whole bunch of new growth planted earlier this year, and then of course our beautiful giant Mexican key lime tree providing a lot of fruit for us. But this ice cream bean over here has been doing spectacular, really filling in this space. You almost can't tell where the ice cream bean tree begins and our fig tree ends. It's kind of creating this really forest-like look here. Once again, while I'm trying my hand a little bit of agroforestry, having this line of trees with some of our support species like our bananas in between there. Really close planting on these as well. I am by no means an expert in agroforestry, but I always love to learn, and I have learned a little bit about it. So one thing with this tree, which I already mentioned, but it actually burned back. So last summer was its first summer in the ground. This was the original tree, this stalk right here, this little stalk, and it actually burned back completely to the roots, and this whole new tree came out here. Like I mentioned before, most of our ice cream beans are cuttings or grown from seeds, so I'm not worried about it, you know, coming as rootstock or anything like that. But almost since exactly last year, it has now grown this huge tree, and you'll notice there's just tons and tons and tons of new growth on here. It's doing really, really well. I'm hoping that we can make it through our winter, have it do well through our winter. Winter is the biggest enemy of our ice cream bean trees. They absolutely love our heat, love our summers, but our winters they're not the biggest fan of. It's part of what keeps them at the size, a more moderate size. So I will end up frost protecting this tree, although realistically when I cover it, which how I cover it is I generally put frost fabric structure, almost like a box around the structure and then around the tree, and then I go and I put in an alternative heat source, which it still has its alternative heat source from last year, these C9 Christmas light bulbs. So I will continue to use the same C9 Christmas light bulbs this year, although realistically this year probably only going to be protected up until about 4 feet or so. So all of this upper growth has the potential to die back depending on how cold it is and depending on how the tree does. I know there's some ice cream bean trees that are acclimated to our climate and they do great in the winter and they don't continue to grow, but they don't die back either. But since this is such a young tree and it's only been in the ground really for 2 years, we will see how it does after this next winter. All right, so there we go, a little update on our 2-year-old ice cream bean tree. The question was, how is it growing? I think it's been growing really, really well, especially with some of the setbacks it had at the beginning of last year where, you know, it died back to the roots and has come back since then. It seems to be just absolutely thriving and pushing out so much new growth. I am really, really excited to see what the next year has in store for this tree. I know there are people in the Phoenix area that have gotten our ice cream bean trees to fruit, so it is possible to get them to flower and fruit here in the Phoenix area, definitely when they are a little bit older and more acclimated to our climate does that happen. A couple other things that I do with this tree, I did heavily mulch the tree when I originally planted it, put a lot of really thick layer of mulch around it. I also amended the soil when I planted it too, did about 50% of our kind of potting soil and then 50% of our clay soil. And then some other things that I've been doing with this is it does get water, and it did get water this year. Once every week, so once a week this tree would get water. I think that does have something to do with how great it's doing this year. The year before I was doing it once every 2 weeks, didn't quite do as well as this year, so it does seem to need a little bit more water than that once every 2 weeks, even with that heavy mulch on there. I do actually need to apply some new mulch over here, but maybe we'll get to use some of that agroforestry concept and chop some of those banana leaves and put them down. The other thing that I have been doing and sticking to with all of my tropical trees, but our ice cream bean especially, is that fish emulsion once a month. So once a month I pick usually the end of the month and come out and I end up filling up a bucket and giving a 5-gallon bucket of fish emulsion to each of our fruiting and flowering tropical trees and plants here in the green yard. Really seems to help with that growth and that future fruit production as well. So if you guys have any questions about our ice cream bean tree, please feel free to comment below. I really, really love this tree. I think it's gonna do really well here in this spot in the pool part of the green yard. I'm hoping this winter it ends up thriving, and even that growth above that frost protection ends up doing well. As always, if you guys want some more great green content, please make sure to like and subscribe and follow us on our social media pages. And make sure to live green, plant lots, and have fun. We'll see you guys next time.